The hall is still asleep, but history is already awake. Firelight moves slowly across stone walls where thousands of footsteps once passed. Before any battle began, before any sword was lifted, this place listened to breathing. This is where survival quietly started. A knight enters the hall. His armor is heavy, not heroic. Each step sounds like effort, not glory. People nearby pause what they are doing. Power has arrived, but so has exhaustion. The knight stops. His hands reach for the helmet. This is the moment stories usually skip. Metal lifts away, and a face appears. Not a legend, just a man carrying the weight of long days and longer nights. This is not a moment of victory. It is not defeat either. It is hunger. The same hunger felt by farmers, servants, and soldiers sitting nearby. Armor does not protect against an empty body. History loves noise. It remembers clashes of steel and shouted orders. It carves names of winners into stone. But it forgets the quiet moments that made survival possible, like sitting down to eat. So we ask a different question. What did it really take to keep a knight alive? Not for a single day, but through years of training, marching, waiting, and fighting. Who carried that burden? To find the answer, we travel back to medieval Europe, a world shaped by land, faith, and fear. A world where power depended not only on weapons, but on systems most people never saw. From the 12th century onward, knights became symbols of order and violence. Villagers looked at them with hope and worry at the same time. Protection had a price, and everyone felt it. Knights trained their bodies for war, but others trained the world around them. Fields were planted, grain was stored, bread was baked. Strength was built far from the battlefield. Behind every suit of armor was a human body, and behind that body was an entire network of people keeping it fed. This story is not just about knights. It is about the unseen hands that made power possible.
Scene 11. Food was never a reward for a knight. It was a tool, carefully used to maintain strength and control. When meals arrived on time, bodies recovered, training continued, and order held firm. When food was delayed or reduced, even the most loyal men grew restless. Power did not begin with swords or armor. It began quietly, with what was placed on the table each day. Far from castle walls, long before a knight ever sat down to eat, men and women worked the land. They woke before sunrise to plant grain, cut it down, and carry it away. Their days were shaped by weather and exhaustion. Their names were never recorded, yet every armored rider depended completely on their labor. Grain alone could not sustain anyone. It had to be transformed. It was crushed between stones, mixed by hand, and baked over fire. This work took hours, sometimes days. Each loaf of bread carried the weight of unseen effort. The strength shown on battlefields was built slowly, far from the sound of war. Nothing about food was accidental. Supplies were counted, measured, and written down in careful lines of ink. Clerks tracked what entered storage and what left it. These quiet records decided who ate well and who did not. Control was rarely shouted. It lived in numbers and lists. Not all meals were equal. Rank decided portions. Status decided quality. A high-ranking knight ate better than a lower one, and far better than the servants around him. Food reminded everyone of their place. Even hunger followed rules in this world. Some knights lived under strict religious discipline. Their lives followed schedules of prayer, work, and restraint. Meals were silent. Portions were limited. Fasting days were common. Hunger was not always seen as weakness. Sometimes it was considered part of spiritual strength. But discipline had limits. Bodies cannot survive on belief alone. Without enough food, strength faded, wounds healed slowly, and sickness spread. Faith could guide the mind, but it could not replace nutrition. Even the most devoted knight needed fuel to stand. When armies began to move, food became fragile. Supply wagons followed behind, slow and exposed. Rain spoiled grain. Roads broke carts. Enemies targeted provisions instead of soldiers. When food failed to arrive, plans collapsed quickly. Many military campaigns ended without a single decisive battle. Not because one side surrendered, but because food ran out. Fires burned lower. Bread grew thinner. Orders became fewer. Hunger ended wars more quietly than any enemy could. Battles were loud, dramatic, and easy to remember. Hunger was silent and easy to ignore. Yet hunger shaped outcomes again and again. Long before swords crossed, war was already decided by what could. As darkness settled over the camp, movement slowed to a stop. Fires burned low to save fuel, and voices dropped to whispers. Men and women sat close together, not to talk, but to share warmth and what little strength remained. Hunger was no longer approaching. It had already arrived. Morning came without urgency. No horns sounded, no clear orders followed. Faces looked thinner, shoulders heavier. The body understands scarcity before the mind admits it. Even before words were spoken, everyone knew something was wrong. Supply wagons failed to arrive. Some were delayed by rain and broken roads. Others never came at all. Without food, plans that once felt solid began to fall apart. Strategy means little when bodies cannot be sustained. Commanders gathered, not around maps of battle, but around questions of survival. Swords stayed sheathed. Voices stayed low. Decisions were made carefully, knowing that retreat could save lives when victory could not. The army turned back slowly. Banners remained lowered. No one spoke of honor or defeat. Each step away from the front felt heavier than the march toward it. Hunger made even retreat exhausting. When soldiers returned home, they did not return as heroes. They returned thin, tired, and quiet. They carried stories that would never be celebrated and losses that would never be counted. War ended for them without ceremony. At home, families felt the cost immediately. Bread was divided carefully. Portions grew smaller. Every meal became a calculation. The burden of war returned to the table, where it had always begun. In time, stories were told. Songs spoke of bravery, banners, and victory. But these stories left out the empty bowls and cold nights. Memory chose comfort over truth. The image of the knight grew larger than life. Paintings showed strength without weakness. Songs celebrated courage without cost. Hunger disappeared from the story, even though it had shaped every outcome. Yet the truth remained. Power was never built by one man alone. It was carried by countless unseen people When wars ended, people counted the dead. Names were remembered and losses were recorded. But hunger was rarely counted. Empty stomachs left no monuments. The suffering caused by lack of food was slow, quiet, and invisible, yet it stayed long after armies had returned home. Records survived when memories faded. Pages filled with numbers, dates, and neat handwriting showed order and control. But those numbers could not show shaking hands, weak legs, or the fear of not knowing when the next meal would come. Life existed between the lines. Behind every system stood workers whose names were never written down. Women prepared food day after day, baking bread, carrying water, and stretching small portions to feed many. Their labor was constant and exhausting. Without them, strength at the top would have collapsed quickly. Children watched this world closely. They learned early how food was divided and who received more. They learned silence at the table and patience during hunger. War shaped their lives without them ever lifting a weapon, and those lessons followed them into adulthood. Even during hardship, life continued. Markets opened more quietly. Trades happened slowly. People spoke less and counted more carefully. Survival was not dramatic or heroic. It was repetition, caution, and effort carried out every single day. Faith offered comfort when food could not. Men and women gathered to pray for strength and relief. Belief helped many endure fear and loss, but prayer could not replace nourishment. No matter how strong the spirit felt, the body still demanded care. As time passed, stories began to change. They focused on courage, honor, and victory. They became simpler and easier to remember. Hunger did not fit into these stories. It was uncomfortable, so it was slowly pushed aside. Artists and storytellers shaped the image of the knight. Paintings showed shining armor and fearless faces. Songs celebrated bravery without cost. The tired body, the empty stomach, and the dependence on others disappeared from view. Myth replaced memory. What history forgot did not disappear. It lived quietly in families and routines, in how food was saved, how portions were shared, and how habits formed from past scarcity continued. The truth survived without being spoken. In the end, this story is not only about knights or wars. It is about systems, labor, and ordinary people. Power never stood alone. It was fed, supported, and sustained by countless unseen hands, shaping history